to abstract essay, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She is a poet, writer, teacher, editor, translator, and as well as a publisher. No other than Miss Katerina Stoykova. Welcome, welcome, Miss Katerina.
Thank
On
you. I
on abstract,
appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
you're most welcome. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Bulgaria, and I immigrated to the United States 30 years ago. And for the last 15 years, I have been a publisher and a writer and a teacher. Uh, my press is called Accents Publishing, independent press for brilliant voices. It is located in Lexington, Kentucky. It is local press with international reach. We publish a lot of poetry books, but we have plans to expand, and we have been expanding and branching into different genres, and we're excited about that. I have been an editor and an author, and I have been handling poetry in its various forms over the last 15 or so years. So I have learned a lot about the art of putting a book together, starting with a pile of poems, and then how to proceed to coming up with a concept and how to arrange the poems and how to edit them all as a one unit, as a opera, right? And how to find a publisher. And then from that point on, once you have a book in hand, what do you do next? So all that is between the covers of this book, some practical advice. And as far as I know, this is still the only book that gives um, that guides a reader through the entire journey.
Miss Katerina Stoykova, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the Poet's Guide to Publishing. What do you think are the biggest misconceptions poets have about getting to their work published?
Well, I don't know what's the most common misconceptions. What I have seen, um, people, people, the earlier they are in their journey, poetic journey, the easier they think it will be, or the faster they think it will be. Uh, People often think that once they publish a book, everybody will know about it. And even if everybody knows about it, if that means that people will actually buy it, um, that publishing a book will change their life. It doesn't really change your life all that much. It is a wonderful accomplishment that changes you, because you kind of need to graduate to a different level of being. You need to become a whole lot more um, persistent and humble at the same time in order to finish every one of those stages here that I talk about in the Poet's Guide to Publishing.
Miss Katarina, in your book, you talk about conceiving a poetry collection. What does the stage look like for a poet?
Well, we keep on writing poems and then we accumulate a body of work. And what do we do after that? We have a pile of poems. We need to take the time to figure out uh, what are the themes and the topics inside these piles. And that is one way that we can quickly see what we have been writing about, because it is very unlikely that we have been writing about just one thing. So, what I recommend for people to do is to actually print everything physically, to have physical paper. I think it's very difficult to do this work without having it actually printed. So, I recommend to people to, for one day, to do nothing else and start in the morning when they're really fresh and relaxed, um, and they haven't worked on anything else, to start reading poems and then maybe even labeling the main topic contained in a poem and sorting them into piles. And once you see that you have, let's say, 3 piles or 5 piles, then you can count how many poems you have in each pile, and then you can see if there are any relationships between the piles, because maybe if you put two of them together, then you have enough for a full-length collection, which many people know that you need at least 48 pages of poetry in order for uh, to have enough for a full-length poetry collection. Then sometimes people cannot find themes in their work. So that is, then in this case, I recommend the best hits approach, to take a look at their poems and see which are the ones that they feel they must include. What are the best poems? And then to have a second pile that is a maybe. Well, these poems might make it into the book or might not make it into the book. So you make decision whether to include them or not after the initial manuscript has been arranged. And then they might look under certain conditions in the manuscript. I hope that makes sense.
Makes sense indeed. And do you recommend poets work with professional editors, or can self-editing be enough in a certain case?
Well, I would recommend to absolutely every poet to have somebody proofread their work, whether they're professional or they're friends who is really good at grammar, or someone who has really good attention to detail. Um, you don't necessarily need to pay a professional editor, um, but it's a good idea to exchange your manuscript with several peers. So poets who belong to writers groups, that makes everything a whole lot easier, because normally in the writers groups you have people who are at the same writing stages and everybody has a manuscript in progress. So people often exchange their exchange manuscripts with their friends, and that normally is enough. And then sending it to a publisher, and if publisher accepts it, then the publisher uh, normally will proofread and make sure that uh, that if anything needs to be edited further, then that will be suggested, and the poet will work with a professional at that point.
What are the some common editing mistakes you have seen in poetry manuscripts that hold writers back?
I would
Yes.
say not understanding form and lineation. Mm, is pretty obvious to an experienced editor. So, one thing that distinguishes poetry from prose is that poetry is broken in lines, right? And prose is in paragraphs, although there is continuum between the two genre, and you can have lyrical essay and you can have a prose poem. But when an editor looks at a poem, it needs to look edited. It needs to look, to quote Emily Dickinson, well made thing. It needs to look um, like the form has been thought about, that it has been chosen. Uh, and I'm not saying that it needs to look like a cookie cutter, but if the work generally is close to a draft, then the poem doesn't look all that attractive on the page. What do I mean? Like if you go to a restaurant and they bring you food, first you will enjoy the look at the food for a second or two before you start eating. The same thing happens with a poetry book and a poem. First, you will look at it and you will enjoy its beauty on the page before you read it. So, thinking about form and lineation and taking receiving some education in about that would be very helpful to poets.
Indeed. And Miss Katerina, what are the pros and cons of traditional publishing versus self publishing for poets today?
Okay, when you traditionally publish, you work with a team, which is very helpful. If you are a beginner poet and you decide to self-publish, then I would recommend that you hire several professionals so that your poetry book does not look self-published. You want your poetry book to look um, standard, and I mean standard in the best possible way. It needs to have a professionally designed cover. It needs to be of standard size that it can fit on bookshelves with other books. It needs to have blurbs. It needs to have an ISBN. It needs to have readable fonts. And what I've seen is that people learn things the hard way if they self-publish and they have not talked to professionals. And also, I think that when you self-publish, when you traditionally publish, you share the responsibility of all decisions with your editor and your publisher, which also have um, the best interest of the book in mind. So you're not on your own. And even though in poetry publishing, more often than not, you kind of have to do a lot of legwork yourself. Still, still, you're not entirely on your own.
Miss Katerina, how does poets identify the right press or publisher for their work?
Well, there are a series of tests that I perform when I research a publisher. First, does the publisher have a website? And then, if the publisher doesn't have a website, I normally wouldn't consider that publisher. And if the publisher has a website, I'll take a look at who they have published. And then I'll see if I know any one of these people. And if they do, I'll ask them for their experience. Um, and I ask two questions. What was your experience? And do you recommend the press? And I think both of them are valid and important questions, and you will receive a lot of information, even if um, the answer will tell you a lot, even
Hmm.
if it's not direct. Then uh, another thing you can do is you can look at how long the press has been in business, because it's hard to keep a literary press going. So if the press has been around for a while, there is a good chance that it will continue existing. Another thing is I would look at who they publish, and if they publish authors of various backgrounds and various stages of their career, then that to me is a very encouraging sign, because it shows to me that the press is looking for interesting work rather than a particular type of people to publish. Like if you go to a press and see that all they publish is university professors, then, well, if you're not a university professor, then you don't really have a good, all that great chance. Then I would look for distribution. I think that is very important if the press has good distribution. And then, do they cover all expenses in publishing a book? And do they also offer some kind of royalty and free books, opportunity to buy your own books at discounts, or basically what kind of contract, um, that kind of thing. That's where I would start.
Miss Katerina, how can poets identify the right press in their role, especially in the context, chapbooks, and literary journals, play in paving the way for a published collection?
Let me see if I understand the question. How can you get started publishing so
Yes.
that you can Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, what role do contests, chapbooks, and literary journals play in paving the way for a published collection?
Well, if you win a contest for a manuscript in order to get a book published, that's wonderful. And if it's a major contest, then that's also a career changer too. Various contests may or may not influence a publisher's decision. Um, you know, some people may say that you want to build a acknowledgments page, meaning here is my manuscript, and at the end I have an acknowledgments page stating that this, and this poem have been published in certain magazines. I think that it's ultimately whether the editor of the press likes your manuscript. And thinking of my books that have been accepted to be published and the books that I accept, is I make my decision well before I get to the acknowledgments page. So to me, it's a whole lot less important uh, if the work has been, parts of the work have been published, basically gotten the stamp of approval by other publishers, then it's a lot more important that I like the work and it is in line with my goals and my vision for the kind of work that I want to publish in my press. So I would say, yeah, keep on submitting to publish, but ultimately, the manuscript, the full length manuscript that you end up with, needs to be really high quality. And somebody needs to like it, because it may be high quality, but you need to find the right person to read it. And sometimes it takes a while for that to happen.
Many poets find marketing intimidating. What strategies do you share that feel authentic and manageable, Miss Katerina?
Well, I mean, yes, a lot of us are shy and don't really want to go out all that much. But the thing is, when you publish a book, the author is the book's best friend, and you need to support that book. You need to be in service of that book. So you need to um, come up with a marketing plan. And you need to figure out what you can do and what you're willing to do. Uh, if you're publishing a poetry collection, you need to plan a book launch, either online or in person, in which you announce to the world that this book is out, it is available, and let me read to you a little bit of it. And then that event is about you. But something that is very helpful for poets is to get plugged in into already existing reading series, local and regionally. So locally, pretty much no matter where you live, there is some place that you can go and read a poem at an open mic, or there is a place where a good literary citizen has monthly reading series, and we can see if we can get plugged in. Uh, it is very beneficial to do that because these reading series already have built-in audience, people who go every month, no matter who is being featured. So you will have new people listen to you. And you can do that while traveling. If if you plan it well in advance and you know that, for example, you'll be going, let's say in Chicago, then you can see some of the reading series in Chicago, whether they would be willing to feature you and your book, and if not, whether you can read a poem on the open mic. You can still tell people about your book. Social media helps a lot, and it's fairly low cost way to spread the word. Uh, Also, if you have published poems in poems in magazines, you can write to those magazines to see if they would run a review of your book. And if you have a mailing list, you can write to the mailing list and tell them that you have a new book out. Something that helps is also to say that you have several review copies, meaning you'll give someone a copy for free if they write a review and place it in a journal or in a blog.
Miss Katarina, how important is building a personal brand or social media presence for poets trying to reach an audience?
Well, out, my opinion is that it helps a lot. Um, from what I've seen is people who have built social media networks and personal networks that have personal networks. They don't necessarily need to be social media. They could be um, a mailing list kind of networks, or they could belong to a bigger network offline. But let's talk about social media. The thing about social media is that you need to build that network before you publish the book. If you publish a book and then you start scrambling to build the network, it's too late, because people will see it as an imposition, and they would see through you trying to become their friend on social media so that you can sell them a book. The thing is, they would want to first be your friend, to like you, and then to buy your book because they like you. That's one of the reasons why people buy books initially, because they're your friends and they want to see you succeed, and because they want some of that joy and excitement that you have when you have published a new book.
Hmm. Okay, interesting indeed. And Miss Katerina, what is or can you share a success story of a poet who effectively marketed their work in a creative way?
Yeah, one of the Accents authors um, decided that every day she will send an email to three of her friends, to, to three of the people on her mailing list, like personal emails. Hi, how are you doing? Here is what's been happening in my life. By the way, I have a new book. Here is the link. And she sold ton of books, and she was very happy because not only that she sold a lot of books, but also she caught up and connected and reconnected with friends that she hasn't talked to in a while. So it was a positive thing for everybody.
Miss Katarina, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to, to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, law 101 and mental health 101, love letters in third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Miss Katarina, what final advice or piece of advice would you give to emerging poets who dream of seeing their book poetry published?
The big three are reading, writing, and getting feedback, and being consistent with that eventually will lead to publishing. Publishing requires some consistency also, but um, find a writing group and keep on writing and get feedback and edit and write and edit and read other people's work too.
Miss Katerina Stoykova, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the
Thank you.
world.
Thank you, Daniel.
Hoping for more empowering books like this to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would love it if your listeners look up The Poet's Guide to Publishing and my other books. They are available wherever books are sold.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Katerina Stoykova because you support her for sure. More and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Katerina, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.